if you've been watching all my streams or anything, you know that I've been playing a lot of Palworld. I've been playing a lot of Palworld off stream. And if you didn't know, Palworld 1.0 finally released on July 9th, 2026. And it's been crazy. I've been playing a lot of this, and I actually played on the early access as well. This was back like 2 years ago. And during this entire time, if you didn't know, there has been this lawsuit against Palworld from the one and only, of course, Nintendo, Su-chan, and I've been keeping up with it this entire time, at least here and there. You know, I'm not like obsessive over it or nothing, but everything is finally coming to a head after all this time, after all these years. Palworld wins. It's undisputed. I think they had to pay like $30,000. I'm sure there's lawyer fees and all this. It's not that Palworld didn't come out of this unscathed. It's just that Palworld's coming out of this as a champion, as the hero we all needed to go against a titan like Nintendo, who's just always so happy. Like I said, Su-chan, they're always coming after the little guys. They're afraid of anyone even remotely touching a scrap of the power that they hold, of the monopoly that they hold over their little IPs and their little niches of genres, right? And this is coming from something that was a company, Nintendo, that was a company that was once, you know, sort of the underdog to Sony, the people that they didn't agree with Sony, and they had to split off with Sony to become their own individual company because they were afraid of being literally consumed by Sony. They went from being that family friendly household name that everybody knew and loved and trusted. They were a trusted company. I think that's what really hurts the most here for a lot of us, is that Nintendo was this company that we all we looked up to in a way. Like, hey, if it was a Nintendo product, it was going to be quality. If Nintendo was behind it, you knew it was going to be all love, that it was all about the players and fun. But over the years, especially in the past, 10 to 15 years, it's just gone downhill and downhill. And it seems more and more about greed and holding their place at the top of the throne than it is about the players. Now, I grew up as a Pokemon fan, right? I think a lot of us did. And I remember watching the anime. I played the games. I collected cards lightly. I was never a huge Pokemon card guy, but it was all just memories, stuff that's nostalgia. Even back then, even as I was younger, there was a time very quickly where I realized that Pokemon wasn't it anymore, that it just wasn't cool. And it's not that the ideas that they had for Pokemon and originally were bad in any way. It just got stale, got boring. It was the same thing over and over and over again. And sure, you had new legendaries. Sure, you had new Pokemon. You had new trainers. You had new gym leaders. You had new regions, so on and so on. Essentially, the DNA of the game was the same. You start off your journey, you pick your Pokemon, and then you go out and then you battle Pokemon walking through the grass, and you try and look for the legendaries, and eventually that got boring. It worked for a time. It worked for a time for sure. But eventually, the whole aspect of the new legendaries got really stale to me. I mean, these were supposed to be mythic, legendary, half the time older than time beings that were just on an otherworldly type feel that eventually just felt way less impactful the longer the games went on and the more and more of these legendaries existed. And even back then as a kid, I felt like, all right, like, this is boring, this is old, I'm done. Like, I think the last Pokemon game I played was Diamond, and I think anyone who grew up with Pokemon, most of us eventually started to feel that same way. Pokemon it lost it. It never really pushed to innovate. The thing is, Pokemon and Nintendo, they came after Palworld because they dared to step in their genre and try to be innovative, try to push it to something that was beyond the literal bare minimum. But here we are at the end of the lawsuit. Pokemon tried, but ultimately, at this point, they cannot stop Palworld. And this comes from Game Rant, right? This is an article from Game Rant that you've probably seen in other videos and stuff. Essentially, this whole lawsuit comes down to patents. This isn't even really your typical lawsuit in which it was brought up under copyright infringement and they're trying to prove copyright infringement in the court of law. This entire lawsuit was pretty much Nintendo filing patents and then hoping that those patents go through at all. And if they go through, well, then now they actually have a case to go up against Palworld. And then that's essentially how it started, and that's how it ended. Essentially, all their patents have been rejected everywhere. First, they were getting rejected in different countries. Like, I'm pretty sure that the American Patent Office started rejecting their patents. But now the Japanese Patent Office is rejecting them, and that's a huge deal, right? Because this is one of the defining Japanese companies. Nintendo is arguably the Japanese company. For Japan not even to be backing Nintendo on this is a huge thing. Now, I'm pretty sure Palworld and Pocket Pair is also Japanese, so I think that plays a part in this. Now, in this article, pretty much all it's going through is that Japan Patent Office rejected Nintendo's monster catching patent application after an examiner cited footage from a 2013 Pokemon fan game as prior art. Now, let me explain this and break this down in very simple terms. Nintendo was going after multiple different patents, and all of them just as egregious as the last one. One of them is just like capturing, I'm pretty sure, the whole sphere mechanic, but like some of them were actually just insane, like, which is like riding creatures and summoning something to help you in a combat scenario, right? Which, you know, hundreds of, if not thousands of games use these mechanics. But of course, this one in particular, the pretty much the nail in the coffin is their monster catching patent, which you have to understand, of all their patents, the ability to catch monsters, especially in a ball of some kind, this is their ace in the hole. If they hold right to any ideas, it's got to be that one, right? Obviously, riding a creature that's so obscure, that's so ridiculous, but a patent like this, right? Catching monsters with like a sphere, doing this and that. Now that makes sense. As we were talking about just a minute ago, right? Nintendo and Game Freak, they have been nothing but lazy, greedy, and all these different things when it comes to Pokemon as a brand. Feeling like they have to do less while upping the prices, making it more and more expensive as time goes on, and just expecting everybody to be like idiots, shilling out their money, throwing it down like a bitch, throwing it back on a stripper pole, right? You get the idea. But this comes to the title of my video, right? This is the reason Nintendo and Game Freak really truly lost, and it is actually comes down that greed over the years, and they think that they can just give us half-assed products, not be innovative, raise the prices year after year after year. That is ultimately what bites them in the ass. That is the nail in the coffin, because this all comes down to, in 2013, it was cited a footage from a 2013 fan game as prior art. Now, what this means essentially is that this game, Pokemon Generations, it was a fan-made title, probably free because, you know, Nintendo cease and desist fucking everything, right? But this game came out and essentially delivered what people wanted out of a Pokemon game for years and years and years in this three-dimensional space, with the actual ability to throw the spheres, catch the Pokemon in the spheres, and do these different things in its own title by its own fans, trying to give themselves and the other fans what they've wanted from Game Freak and Nintendo this whole time on their own merit, just because Nintendo refuses to do it themselves. That is what put the nail in the coffin. I want you to think about that for a minute. I want you to really let that set in. This didn't happen just because, oh yeah, there's a million other games that, you know, hold pre-existing mechanics to what those patents are that Nintendo filed. These are games. This is a game made by Nintendo fans to appease and scratch the itch that Nintendo refused to scratch for years. Their neglect to their IP, their neglect to their fans to create the things that we've been asking for decades is the exact thing that put the nail in the coffin. Now, mind you, this is a 2013 game. Nintendo has had the ability, has had the hardware and resources to give us the 3D Pokemon world traveling adventure game that we've wanted since like the early 2000s for decades. Since could have been on the GameCube. It could have damn near been on the Nintendo 64 in a jank version. It could have been on the Wii. It could have been on the Wii U. Did they ever take the time to give us those things? No. Look at the graphics. I'm not going to play the video, but look at the graphics. You think that this couldn't have been Wii U or Wii quality or even GameCube quality? This looks like a game that could have been put on the GameCube graphically. And now, mind you, Palworld is not only putting them to shame, but they are breaking records. They are sitting comfortably, regularly at the #2 spot on Steam. They broke the record for being one of the only 3 games in Steam history to reach 2 million current players. They're still peaking near 1 million players right now. This is the second time that they have broken over 1 million players since launch, since their original early access. They're absolutely dog walking over Pokemon right now. Not to mention that usually they're on sale. People are playing and having a good time, and you can see it all over the place. Everybody's talking about it. Of course, we're sitting at overwhelmingly positive in English, very positive in just recent reviews. And if Nintendo was pissed now, if I was Nintendo right now, I would be kicking myself, being like, how the hell couldn't I have just made the game? I should have just made the game. We should have just put in the money and made the game people wanted, but we didn't. And now, of course, they're probably too egotistical to fucking admit that it's their fault in the beginning. From the whole thing, it's their fault. Every bit of this is their fault. I mean, they could have even just let Power alone, but now they made a fool of themselves. But if they're pissed, if they think that they've got shit to worry about with Power World now, I mean, well, this is just getting started. This is the beginning of a precedent. Now everyone knows that creature collecting games are on the table. Anybody can make this shit, and we got several of them coming up. You got like Animo, I think it's called. You got a Anima something whatever creature collector from Hoyoverse. Now, I'm not saying that game looks good or not. I don't really know, but I would love to see this. This was a game company that made a bunch of money, that was pretty much non-existent, made a bunch of money. I would love to see Nintendo try and go up against Hoyoverse. It's not even that. Hoyoverse racks in money, and they've been racking in money for like 6 years, just racking in money, billions. It would be a joke to them to do this lawsuit, and they're coming out with their own creature collecting game. It's over for Nintendo. It's over. That's pretty much it for the video, y'all. I think it's very interesting that, to me, the whole nail in the coffin is Nintendo, Game Freak, and their own neglect for their fans, pushing the bare minimum, selling it for a higher price, completely outdated games, and people will shill out the money anyway, that they think that they can just keep giving us this inferior product over and over again.